everyone. My name is Grace Atwood, and I am thrilled to introduce Julie Clark, who is one of my favorite thriller authors. She is so talented. She is the New York Times best-selling author of The Ones We Choose and The Last Flight, which was also a #1 international bestseller, and it's now been translated into more than 20 languages. She lives in LA with her family and a golden doodle with poor impulse control. I'm curious to know more about that, but I want to talk about your book.
Okay. I also want to announce we just found out last week that The Lies I Tell is now a #1 bestseller in Germany. So before we've even published here in the United States, it's already #1 in Germany. So I'm super excited about that. But The Lies I Tell is the story of Meg Williams, who's a con artist who travels the country under assumed names, creating elaborate backstories to back up whatever lies that she's telling. After 10 years of kind of traveling around perfecting her craft, she returns home to Los Angeles to pull her biggest con yet on the man who she believes destroyed her life. But what she doesn't know is that somebody is in Los Angeles waiting for her to return. And it's an investigative reporter named Kat Roberts, who was collateral damage on a con that Meg pulled many, many years ago. And Kat has been waiting for her own revenge. And so her plan is to infiltrate Meg's life under an assumed name and reclaim what she believes was taken from her. So it's a cat and mouse story where you're not really sure who's the cat and who's the mouse.
I loved that about it. It really kept me on my toes. I read it in like a single day, as I did with your last book too.
Thank you. That's exciting. I love it when people tell me that.
So we have so many questions. I'm going to jump right into them. And thank you to everyone who wrote in with a question. There were a lot. So the first person, Hanny Lynn asked, what inspired you to create this plot?
I was listening to a podcast. I don't know if you guys listen to podcasts a lot, but I get a lot of ideas from podcasts for books, especially like true crime podcasts. So I was listening to this podcast called Who the Hell is Hamish? It's in Australia, about an Australian man who is a con artist, and he gets like women to fall in love with him. And then he convinces them to like give him hundreds of thousands of dollars for like can't lose investment opportunities. And I remember thinking at the time I was listening to it, thinking, I think a woman would be better at this. Like, I think women are a little, I don't want to say more trustworthy, like that's not the right word, but I think women are not threatening in the way that men are threatening, right? Like we're automatically suspicious of that guy on the corner. We're automatically suspicious of that guy over there, but we're not suspicious of women in the same way. And so I also feel like powerful men especially underestimate women. They don't think that they're as smart as they might be, or they don't think that they're, diabolical in the same way that like a powerful man might be diabolical. And so my main character, Meg, kind of leans into these assumptions about, women and uses them to her advantage.
Did you do any special type of research to get into the head of a con artist?
I did. I read a book about con artists by Anna Kournikova, and it really, really helped me kind of understand the way that con artists manipulate people. And so they tend to target people in vulnerable situations, or going through major life changes. That's one way that they kind of keep their eye open for targets. And they also kind of try to get to know what your needs are, like what is your one biggest desire or one biggest wish, and then they convince people that they're the only person who can give that to them, right? I'm the one that can help you with that. Yeah. So it was really fun and really interesting. I learned a lot about kind of the psychology of con artists.
And then when it came to the two women, one thing I really loved about this was the friendship that you cultivated between the two characters, as opposed to just, their competitiveness. What made you decide to do that?
Well, first of all, I wanted to sort of play up the idea that when you are kind of in the sphere of a con artist, right, it becomes really hard to see what's really happening. Like con artists are charming and enigmatic and, very personable and likable and dynamic. And so I wanted to show Kat, who knows exactly who Meg is and knows exactly what Meg is doing or trying to do. And yet she still falls under her spell. She still has moments where she forgets, like, this is a woman who is trying to con someone out of something. And I wanted to like kind of highlight that a little bit, because it's really easy, even when because a lot of people who are conned never believe that it would happen to them. They don't think they would fall for it or whatever, but that's sort of the art of the con. But I also wanted to not have two women working against each other. Like, it's not really the message that I like to give about women. I feel like women, when we are working with each other together toward a common goal, we're really unstoppable, And so I really do want to step away from the idea that women like to tear other women down. We don't like that. So that was another way that I wanted to do that.
Yeah, I don't want to give anything away, but there was kind of a little bit of a villain that you didn't expect to be the villain, and I enjoyed that part.
Yeah, no spoilers here, but yeah, I mean, there needed to be a villain of some kind, and so I needed to make that happen.
So I absolutely loved The Lies I Tell. I always tell people it's probably my favorite thriller of 2021.
Thank you.
And this is up there for 2022. Yeah, I have, it's only been 6 months. But how did your writing process differ between the two books?
With The Last Flight, I didn't know I was writing a thriller. When I sent it off to my literary agent and she sent it back and she said, this is a thriller, and so you need to revise it with a thriller in mind. I remember thinking, like, it is? I didn't know. I just wanted to write a story about two women who wanted to trade plane tickets and like kind of what happened afterward. And so I had to figure out how to write a thriller. My first book wasn't a thriller. It was like an upmarket women's fiction. And so I needed to kind of back up and think, okay, now I guess I'm writing a thriller. And there's certain things, certain beats that you have to hit, a certain pacing you have to shoot for, that you don't have to be as rigid about when you're just writing contemporary fiction. And so I had to learn how to do that. And so it took a long time. I mean, I want to say that book took me maybe 3 years to write, from the start to maybe selling it to source books. So, The Lies I Tell was a lot faster. I mean, it was a year from when I pitched the idea to publication, pretty much less than.
Yeah.
Terrifyingly less than, yeah.
Fast. That's really fast.
It was fast. But I had a really strong idea about the structure of this book. I had an idea about how I wanted it to go. I knew who my two main characters were. I knew kind of what they wanted and what they needed. And so it just kind of, since I had such a clear vision, it didn't take so long. And I already kind of knew from before kind of how I needed to hit those beats.
That makes a lot of sense. What would you say you enjoyed most about writing this book?
Meg. I really liked writing Meg. She's probably one of my favorite characters that I've ever written. Just the way that she moves in the world and the way that she thinks and the things that she says and the chances that she takes. And, I loved writing her.
I loved her as a character. One reader, Kimberly, had a great question, and she asked, how do you create such a multi-layered villain in a story? How did you get the reader to empathize with someone who's supposed to be bad? Because she's very likable.
Yeah. Well, I kind of feel like con artists are likable. So that's number one. People who have fallen for a con generally genuinely like that person at some point, and they have a really hard time kind of accepting that this person would do that to them. So I definitely needed her to have that likable aspect, or then she just wouldn't, the story wouldn't stick. You wouldn't believe that anybody would fall for what she's trying to do. But I also feel like no matter who you're writing, a protagonist, an antagonist, all of your characters have to believe that they are doing the right thing for themselves at that moment, right? Like there is really no such thing as like a truly villainous person. I mean, maybe like a sociopath, like serial killer, but aside from them, most people like think they're a good person who maybe is making some bad choices, or maybe isn't doing the best thing right now, but like deep down they really are a good person, or they believe they're a good person. And so you have to show all of those sides of a character even when they're doing bad things. But my goal was really to write a character who was doing bad things that the reader was rooting for. Like that was really what I was going for, because I love it when I read books like that, when I'm just loving that bad villain to like turn it around or make a good choice, and then all of a sudden it's good again.
I love that too. Did you ever watch that show back in, I don't like, I guess 10 or 20 years, 10 years ago now, White Collar?
I might have, but I have like, I don't remember. I watch and read books over all the time.
Okay.
And I'm like, wait, I think I saw this already. So I may have.
It has Matt Bomer, and he's like a con artist with a heart of gold, and you just love him so much as a character, even when he's doing bad things.
Yeah. Yeah. That was pretty much what I was going for. I mean, I really wanted you to root for Meg, even though what she was doing, you kind of wished that she wasn't doing it. But,
Yeah.
she has reasons for doing what she does. I mean, um, she didn't grow up like wanting to be a con artist. That wasn't like her life goal. And, her mother died when she was in high school. She's homeless. The book opens, she's homeless. She's living in her car. She's working the front desk at the Y. She's like, at one point she says, I'm one UTI away from a homeless shelter. Like that's how precarious her situation is.
Yeah.
And she starts kind of grifting by using online dating to get free meals,
Yeah.
like she just wants a hot meal and maybe like a safe place to sleep for the night if the guy seems to be okay. And then she realizes that she's kind of good at it, and then she starts from there.
Those parts really broke my heart, and you just
Uh,
really root for her.
yeah.
We talked a lot about Meg, but what was your favorite part to write about Kat?
Um, I loved Kat's determination. I loved researching investigative reporters. I talked to several to kind of help me understand the jargon, how they work. I have a lot of respect for the way that they have to chase down stories, and the way that they have to like work so hard to break a story. And it's so heartbreaking, because Kat was on her way up at the LA Times. She was ready to break out as an investigative reporter, and then something happened that she believes Meg was partially responsible for, that just derailed everything. And she's really now just like writing clickbait articles, for pennies on the word, kind of, barely making ends meet, and dreaming of the day when she can break out again. She's determined to sort of take her life back, and that's her goal. That's what she wants. What she needs, though, is to kind of open her eyes to what's happening around her in a different way. Um, and so sometimes the characters' wants and their need are in conflict a little bit. They think they want something, but they actually need something slightly different.
Yeah, that makes sense. There was times where I just wanted to shake her and be like, "No,
Yeah.
you're looking at the wrong thing."
I know. Yeah. But that so often happens.
What would you say your biggest challenge was as you wrote this book?
I think probably the timeline, getting it done in the timeline that I had, but also I would say making sure that everything that Meg did worked. That there isn't a hole in her plan, or a hole in her strategy, or something that would make it like not possible for her to do. Um, that was really hard. So I talked to a lot of experts. I talked to a lot of, she uses DBAs, or doing business as, like as a fictitious business, to kind of set up a different name for herself in different cities. She relies heavily on those. There was a woman in Orange County, I think, who did that, and managed to like steal a lot of money from her clients. She was an accountant or a CPA, and she relied heavily on DBAs too. So I did a lot of research into kind of how she did that. And then, you know, one of Meg's big cons is a real estate scam. And so I talked to one of my really good friends who's a real estate agent and ran everything by her. And she read the book and made sure that, you know, everything worked for how things work in Los Angeles. It's different state to state. So I needed to stay local in Los Angeles for the real estate con because that was where all my experts were. But yeah, that was probably the most challenging part.
I want to switch gears just a little and talk about kind of your writing process and how you like to write, and a few more random questions.
Sure.
Some Jessica Berg asked, "Where do you get your ideas?" And she wrote, "I am so impressed with your writing style, and I'm a huge fan."
Thank you. I get my ideas one at a time. I'm not one of those writers that sort of has a notebook with her all the time and is jotting down ideas or narrating them into my phone notes app or anything like that. I get one idea at a time, and they usually hit when I'm about halfway through working on whatever book I'm currently working on. So when I was in the middle of finishing up The Last Flight, I started thinking about con artists and female con artists, and it, you know, my ideas generally come and then they come again and then they come again, and then I find myself thinking more and more about them to the point where it's like, I think that's my next book. And it just happens. I don't, you know, I don't really have a plan for that, which is a little disconcerting, right? It's sort of a leap of faith of like, I hope I get another book idea, but you know, right now. But I mean, again, and then the book that I'm working on right now, currently, I caught the idea about halfway through when I was almost done finishing The Lies I Tell. I was like, oh yeah, I think that's my next book. And so you just have to kind of trust that the ideas will come, you know, and just be open. Like a lot of times I like to just trust that the universe will sort of put in my path the story that I need to hear, or the character, or somebody tells me a story about a friend of theirs who had this happen to them, and it gives me an idea for something. And, you know, you just have to kind of keep your mind open and wait.
Wait, have you ever read the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert?
Yes.
I
It's
feel like
it's
you
a
have,
lot like that. Yeah.
yeah, I feel like you have very similar philosophy on ideas and them coming to you, and like the right idea might not come to you until you're ready for it. Um,
Yes, and a lot of that happens too, like in the process of writing a book too. You can't force it to happen. And that's why, you know, I think every 2 years for me is like a sweet spot for releasing a book. I released The Last Flight in the year 2020, and now here we are in 2022. I'm releasing The Lies I Tell. And for me, I need that time because there's always a solution to whatever plot problem that you're having. But if you try to force it and force it and force it and force it, you might find a solution, but it won't be the best solution. And it will always feel like the weakest part of your structure, the weakest part of your story. And so you do just have to kind of be patient and wait, and it will come. It always comes, but your brain, as you're doing other things or going about your day, is still always, always, always working on it. So you know, but you know, I think that writing in general is really just a big leap of faith, you know, that people are going to read your book, that, you know, it's going to sell. All of it is just a giant, giant leap of faith.
yeah, absolutely. Wait, so now my obvious question,
Yeah.
can you tell us about the new book and what it is?
We have, I am keeping it kind of under wraps a little bit, but it is based on an urban legend in my hometown. Not really an urban legend, but it was a story that happened in 1979. And I'm about two children who were killed in their home, and it's about the middle brother who wasn't home when they were, who was off somewhere
Oh,
else, and who he grows up to become, and sort of what happens. It's
okay,
completely fictional. It's completely fictional. Aside from the murder, it's completely fictional.
okay.
But
That's
yeah,
like something I'm going to really enjoy. Wait, I
yeah,
have a personal question. You mentioned that your first book was not a thriller, and
yeah,
The Last Flight was not meant to be a thriller. Do you see yourself continuing to write thrillers?
yeah. I do. I mean, I have, you know, I have readers and, you know, people expecting the next thriller, and so, you know, I mean, I'm not entirely sure that what I write is considered a thriller, to be honest with you. I don't get to genre my book. My publisher does, and my
Yeah.
marketing and sales team do. I don't. And I do get I got a lot of feedback from The Last Flight. Like, I don't think this is a thriller. It's a great book, but it's not, I don't see it as a thriller. I see it more
Interesting.
as, domestic suspense, and same thing with The Lies I Tell. It's not, I think it's, I personally would categorize it as more like literary suspense, or,
Okay.
domestic suspense, but like, you know,
Yeah.
uh,
Thriller is so broad. Like it could
very
be
broad. Yeah.
murder, it could be horror, it could be suspense, and everything is kind
Spy
of,
novels,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
And your
locked
novels,
room, serial killers, all of them. Yes, it's all under the thriller banner.
I think what I like also is that there is always a literary component to your books. They're very well written, they're very well researched. They're like very smart thrillers, if we're gonna call it a thriller.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, for me, it's really important to, I mean, for me, I mean, I cut my teeth in the women's fiction genre, which has to do with personal growth, character development, emotional arcs, as well as like plot arcs. And so I really find that I'm carrying that element forward into the thriller genre. I rely very, very heavily on character development, not just plot development. And I want to make sure that at the end of the book, my characters have grown and changed and learned something, and that there's a bigger message to what I'm saying besides just, this is a story about two women and one of them is a con artist and she's trying to get away with something, right? Like Meg, my main character, has to learn something. She has to change and grow and develop by the end of the book. And so does Kat, who also is like my other protagonist. She has to change and learn and grow as well. And that's sort of why I think I can kind of straddle both of the genres at the same time. And I pull a lot of women's fiction readers over to the thriller category because of that, I think.
Yeah, I bet. I would imagine that. That's a really good segue because somebody in the Q&A box said, "What's the moral of the story?"
That is for me to ask you. I'm a teacher as well. I teach fifth grade, and one of my favorite things to ask at the end of every book we study together is, so what is this book really about? And if I can't answer that question about my own books, then I'm not doing my job, right? So I think that if I were to answer that question now, though, I think I would ruin the story for you. So
Yeah, I know. I was about to say what I thought it was, then I was like, I can't say
yeah,
it.
yeah, can't say it, but I would be curious to hear what you think. What do you think this book is really about? So after you read, feel free to shoot me a message on Instagram and let me know what you think the moral of the story is.
Wait, going back to the fact that you teach, somebody wrote, Alexandra wrote, "How do you balance the demands of teaching with writing, especially over the past 2 years during the pandemic when teachers have been dealing with so many unusual circumstances?"
It's been challenging. I wake up very, very early to write. So I wake up at about 3:45 in the morning and I write until 6 or so. And then I get up and I have two boys and I get them up and we get ready for our day. We go off to school and I teach and they learn. And then we come home and make dinner and do homework and all of those things. I try not to write in the afternoon because I'm just too dead tired to write. But you can get a lot done in that amount of time if that's the only time that you have. Obviously I write on the weekends, I write on vacations, I write all the time, every day I write something. But that works for me. And it's a nice, I really like the different ways that my brain is used every day. I can be creative in the morning, I can really be thoughtful and introspective and emotional, and then I get to go to school and forget about it. I would say that publishing a book can be fraught and stressful and angst creating, it's hard. Um, and so going to school and just sitting down with, 10 and 11-year-olds and working on division or, talking about a really good book that we're reading together is just, it's all consuming. And so I can forget whatever it is I'm worrying about, publishing wise for a good 6.5 hours every day. And that's pretty great.
Yeah. But when do you go to bed?
I go to bed early. I mean, my boys right now are 16 and 13, so they go to bed long after I do. A lot of times they'll come in and they'll ask a question and I'll be already asleep.
Okay.
Yeah, I go to bed pretty early. I'm definitely always asleep by 9.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Someone else wrote in the question box, like, does she sleep?
I do. I sleep very well, but I like to think that I am on New York time here on the West Coast.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, like when I go to New York, I sleep in until 6 and I feel like, yeah, I'm good.
Someone else wrote asking about what a typical day of writing looks like for you, but what does your writing process look like?
Um, well, I generally start with a lot of journaling. I'm a big journaler. I like to write longhand. And that sort of helps me think through character and plot and what is this book about and why is anybody going to care about this? And then when I'm ready, I jump over to my computer and start drafting into the computer. But writing longhand really helps me sort of slow down. It helps my brain kind of process things. I don't feel pressure of word count, right? Like, because you're not counting the words on your page, and I can just get ideas down. And then when I'm ready to draft, I jump over to my laptop and draft.
That's smart.
Mhm. It's low pressure. It's very low pressure. And so even the days when I'm not getting any words into the manuscript, I'm still working on it. I'm still thinking about it. I'm still writing about it if I'm not actually writing it.
Yeah. A question that I thought was really interesting is a little more technical was Stephen Frey wrote, did you find it difficult to balance advancing the plot with inserting character interactions and character moments?
Mm. I would say that my first draft is mainly plot. And so, I've got my characters and I know that I need to get them from point A to point B to point C to the end, right? And I kind of know my major beats. I know kind of the entry point of the story. I know the big twist in the middle where it's going to shift everything. And then I know how my book is going to end. I know that very, very early because I have to have something to write toward. And so I would say my first draft is very plot heavy. It's just, and when I read through it, I always am like, God, this is terrible. I mean, like, oh my, this is awful. But on the revision, then I start trying
Every author says that. It cracks me
yeah,
up.
I mean, it's true. You can't write something beautifully the first time. I mean, like maybe Celeste Ng does. I think she may be the only one, but everybody else like does not do that. And so then you go back on revision and then you start thinking about, okay, well, who are these people and what do they care about and what are their life experiences and what might that have been like for them? And even Meg, who's not a good person, when we open this book, you still have to feel like what she's been through, and you have to have an understanding of that. And as a writer, I'm the one inventing that, and so that just takes time to sort of flesh out. And so subsequent drafts are when I get more of my character development and the emotional element, and all of that stuff comes on revision, which is really my favorite part. I do not like drafting. As soon as I can get like 60,000 words, I'm like, that's a draft. I'm okay. Now I can start revising. And that's really where I like to be.
How many drafts did you write for this one?
I don't know. I know some authors are like 112 and I'm thinking like, how do you count? Because a lot of times I'll take a chunk and I'll work it 5, 6, 7 times before moving on to another chunk. And some chunks I work more than others, some work earlier. And so I don't spend a lot of time revising those. So I would say, I mean, if I had to count, I mean, I keep like all of my discarded handwritten, jotted, marked up pages under my bed. And I would say like I have like 2 stacks that are about, I'm leaning back like this high.
Okay.
So I don't know, 20, 30.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. I'm always afraid to throw them away.
Yeah. What if you need them?
I know. I mean, even though like I've published the book, like I don't need them, but like, what if I do? Yeah.
Well, you might. I don't know. For an interview, someone might ask.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Somebody asked if you could be one person in your book, who would you be and why? And I guess my follow-up question to that would be, which one of the women do you relate to more?
I'm probably more like Kat, just in my cautious, thoughtful, like I don't jump into anything without looking at it 30 different ways. But I wish I was more like Meg. I mean, maybe not the conning part, but like I wish that I could be a little more like, I don't want to say bold, but fearless.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm like scared of everything, you know. I get a Facebook friend request and I'm like asking 3 people on their friends list who, you know, do you know this person? Is this a real person? You know, before I accept it.
It's very funny.
Yeah.
I really relate to relating more to one character, but wanting to be more like the other.
Yes, I would say that's true. I mean, I would, you know, I'm inside of both of their heads. I'm inventing them both. And so I would say that they're, you know, all characters that authors write are sort of different versions of themselves, because the best way to make a character feel real is to stop and put yourself inside of their experience and make decisions based on their past life and what they've been through. And so I feel like, you know, part of me is in both of them.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Um, what is the best piece of writing that you've ever received? Bridget Johnson wanted to know that.
The best piece of writing advice.
Yes. Oh, did I
Okay.
say piece of writing?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I read it in a craft book, and I think it was the scene book. And it basically said, I need to dig it up because I cite it all the time and I want to make sure the author gets credit for it. So I'm going to look it up. But it basically said, and I read it long before I ever was published and I was wanting to be published. I was working on a book and I didn't have an agent. I didn't have it. I was just like secretly in my room writing this book, and nobody in my life knew that I was writing a book. Right. And I really, really, really wanted to do it. And and the books and the advice said, to publish a book you have to do 2 things, 2 very simple things. Number 1, think of yourself as a worker, and number 2, show up at the job. Like, that's it. That's all you have to do. And I think that's really, really true. I mean, I do think that you have to, you know, work on your craft. You have to read a lot. You have to, you know, take classes if that's what you need. If you're struggling with pacing, there are tons of online classes you can take. There's tons of writing groups and support groups that you can join in real life or virtually. You have to do the work, and you have to be disciplined. But I don't think that you have to be like, I think you can build the talent, right?
Yeah.
I think you can create that for yourself through hard work. It's not something, you know, as a teacher, we like to we shy away from the term smart, right? Like, because it implies that kids are either born smart or they're not. And like, that's not really how brains work. And I think that writing is similar, right? Like, yes, you can be born with an inherent talent for the written language and just an ear for how it's supposed to sound. And we know those writers who are, right? Um, but I also think that it's something you can work toward and achieve. Like, I don't think that if you're not good at it today, that doesn't mean you won't ever be good at it. I just don't believe that.
I really like that. I really like that advice. I think it's really encouraging. Do you
Yeah.
have any favorite resources for someone who might be aspiring to write a book?
Anne Lamott, obviously, anything she's ever written, read it. Especially her Bird by Bird book. Stephen King's On Writing is another one that I relied on heavily when I was starting to think about doing this seriously for, you know, for money, for a job. Um, and I would just find your writing community. Like, I don't think that you need to, you know, spend a lot of money on classes necessarily. I think what you need to do is find people in a similar place as you are as a writer, and then start workshopping. You know, you read their pages, they read your pages. And, you know, read heavily, read good books, figure out why they're so good, read bad books, figure out why they're so bad. Like, I think that bad books can be as instructive as good books. So don't put something down and think like, I can't learn anything from this. You can learn something from every book you read, even if it's like, I would have done this differently, you know.
That's great advice. I'm going to ask you a few questions about reading and your favorite books and what you read as a kid. But if just to everyone listening, if you have any further questions for Julie, please leave them in the Q&A box, and we will try and get to them before we end. Um, the first question is, what sort of books did you read as a child?
I read everything. I mean, I was reading constantly. The usual things that a kid growing up in the 70s and 80s read. So like Beverly Cleary, Judy Blume. I was a huge Trixie Belden fan.
Mhm.
I am team Trixie Belden way more than I am team Nancy Drew. Sorry. It's just Trixie Belden was just better. And my friend Lisa and I would sit in her room for hours. And, there was like 50, 60 Trixie Belden books, and we had them all. And we would just work through them one after the other, after the other, after the other. Blubber was probably the first book that I finished by Judy Blume, and then went right back to the beginning and read the whole thing again. It just felt so relevant to me. I was a fifth grader. It was about a fifth grader. It was about bullying and girl drama and dynamics. And, all of that felt like relevant to me. And I remember just thinking like, how could she know that this was the book that I needed to read right now, Uh,
Yeah.
and that feeling of like disappearing into another world. My grandfather would take us to bookstores every weekend and buy us books. He bought me and my first Anne of Green Gables book, right? And like from there, it was like, we need to go back to the bookstore because I need to get the rest of them. And
Yes.
it just hours and hours in bookstores was my favorite thing to do.
And what about now? What are your favorite genres to read?
I read everything. I probably don't read sci-fi, although I will read Blake Crouch. And I don't read like heavy fantasy, probably just because the world building is my brain doesn't work that way, but I do love light fantasy. I read historical fiction. Obviously, I read thrillers. I read romance. I read upmarket women's fiction. I read, literary fiction. I don't anything I can get my hands on if it sounds like a good story. Anything I can get my hands on.
Do you have a favorite author?
I have several, but I would say that the ones that were most impactful for me as a writer and a reader, I would say Anna Quindlen, number one, was someone that I read in my early 20s. She wrote One True Thing, which was the first book of hers that I read. And I just remember just the way that she wrote was so beautiful and so thought-provoking. And I remember thinking like, that's what I want to do. Jodi Picoult, another one that I will read anything by her,
Anything.
anything. And I think the first book of hers I read was Plain Truth, about the Amish. Did you read that one? Have you read
I like that one.
Oh, it's an earlier one that she wrote.
Yeah.
And it was the first one that I read just because like the Amish fascinate me. I'm just
Yeah.
fascinated by that world and how they live their lives and how insulated they are and how it's like living in a different century among, modern times. Like I'm just fascinated by that. And so when I read that, it was like this I need to read everything this woman ever wrote. And then I did. And every book she's written has been fantastic. So she's another one. Barbara Kingsolver is another one that's been very transformative for me as a writer. I just read their words and just savor every sentence. Animal Dreams was probably my favorite by her, although I loved The Bean Trees as well. And her newer work is equally lovely and delightful. But sometimes you have like that devotion to the first one, right? Like the first one of that author's work that you read, like that just
Yeah.
stands the test of time.
What about, I guess this would be our last question. What about recent reads and any recommendations of books you read more recently that you just loved?
I just finished Ruth Ware's The It Girl. That was fantastic. It's about an it girl who gets murdered at Oxford. Do you have that one?
I'm writing that down because I'm a big Ruth Ware fan.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. I actually loved it. And I just finished that. And did not, and I normally like with thrillers, it's hard to fool me. A lot of times I see it on page 13 or page 17 or maybe page 70. And with this one, I had some ideas. I was like, I think I know who did it. And then I thought somebody else did it. And then I thought somebody else did it. And then I thought somebody else did it. I was right about one of them. But I didn't really think that it was very good. I got to the end and I was like, that was clever. I did not see that coming. So
I feel the same way. I'm not a writer, but I read so many thrillers. I probably read like two or three a week.
Yeah.
I I feel like it's like very hard to trick me at this point. So if I get tricked, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yes, I love that. I love it when I don't see it coming and then you're like, "What?"
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one I just read. I'm currently in the middle of reading Kimberly Bell's upcoming The Personal Assistant. Now, this is the this is a trigger warning for you, Grace, because it's about an Instagram influencer whose personal assistant infiltrates her life to the point where like it's terrifying. It's
Oh my gosh.
terrifying.
Well, I don't have an assistant, so that helps.
That's good. Don't have one, because it's like, I mean, I'm about halfway through, and oh, it takes the Instagram glam,
Yeah.
like turns it into a nightmare.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I'm
you have
definitely
to read
in
it.
both of those.
You
Any
read it.
other reps?
Another one that's coming out soon is Killers of a Certain Age, which I loved. It's about these octogenarian assassins, these four women who work for an organization. They're recruited right out of college in like the 70s or early 80s, and they were assassins for hire for many years, and they're about to retire. They're on their like retirement cruise, and they realize that the organization has sent assassins to take them out. And so they have to like figure it out and get off the boat. And the best part that I love about it, and maybe this is just because it kind of ages me a little bit, but you know, the assassins that are after them are like these, you know, tech bros who like have cell phones and like hotspots and all this stuff. And the old ladies are like, we got gum, we got shoelace, we got tin foil, we're good. Like they don't need any of that. Like they're
Yeah.
old school, you know, they know how to do this. And all of the technology and stuff that people rely on so much now, they're sort of like, you don't need it. And so that was a really fun read. I loved it. I've been like pumping that one up everywhere. I can't stop thinking about it. It's
Oh,
called
that sounds great.
Yeah.
I'm gonna order all three of those when we get
Ew.
everyone who's listening, go order Julie's book.
Thank you. Yeah, it's out tomorrow. So you should get it like soon.
Um, well, yeah, I think we are wrapping up unless you have anything else you want to plug or say or tell the people what they can do.
I don't. I'm super excited for everybody to read it. Please reach out to me on Instagram, Julie Clark Author. I'm on Twitter, J Clark Ab. I'm on Facebook, Julie Clark Books. And I'm just excited to hear what everybody thinks about it. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you, Grace, for doing this.
Oh, thanks for asking me. I was honored.
So happy. Yeah. It's great to finally talk to you in person.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think that's it. I think we're closed. All right.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Everyone. Bye.